I'm so aware that that question does not matter in the bigger story, but I cannot help but ask that. Fear Street Part 3, 1666. So this is the third and final movie in this trilogy, and I've got mixed feelings on it. The start of this video is going to be spoiler free, however towards the end of this video I'm going to throw in a kind of spoiler section. I've kind of talked about the previous movies in the sequel video, i.e. I talked about number 1 and number 2. I'm not going to get to do that here, so I'm just going to tack this on at the end of the video. So the plot of this movie was set up pretty well in the last film. We're going right back to the origins of the witch to find out what happened to Sarah Fryer. This shows the origins not only of the witch but of the town as well. It's early colonials that have came over. Their accents, not the best. I'm going to get that out of the way right now. They're a little all over the place. They kind of fade. The different actors clearly are better accents than others. Some of the lesser actors in that department, they fade between their accent. It kind of comes and goes even in the same sentences. So if you're thinking about it, or at least kind of conscious of their accents, it might take you out of the movie. So what it turns out to be, without saying spoilers, I can kind of just get into a bit of the general specifics of this era. So the first half of the movie takes place in 1666. It's a little bit of a lie, because the second half of this movie then brings us back into 1994. Carries on from where we'd last seen in 1994. What does strongly benefit is that wherever a time period leaves off, it picks right up from there. So you're not stumbling trying to fill in any gaps. So the people in this town are exactly as you would imagine when you think of any depiction of the colonials. They're all about God. They're too clean as well, which I have to point out. I noticed this and I couldn't stop noticing it. The only time something or someone may be dirty is when it's relevant to the story, i.e. you've got a kind of town drunk character, or someone might have fallen, or someone's been fighting with somebody else. There's narrative reasons that they would be dirty, and so they're dirty. But living at this time, there's a lot of perfectly clean white clothes, for example. If you notice it, it does kind of take you out. So if you've not seen the movie yet and you're watching this, I can only apologise for you really picking up on how clean everybody is with their really all over the place accents. They use the same characters as we've seen in part 1 and part 2, so it's kind of like if you've ever watched American Horror Story, that anthology idea where the same actors are back playing different characters. At first I was a little confused with our main character, Dina, who's now Sarah Fryer, at moments, because there's a couple of times where it cuts to a different actress. Now she's playing Sarah Fryer, but then it will cut to another actress who's also playing Sarah, but only happens in the moments where Dina is Sarah Fryer. Does that make sense? It kind of makes sense. A little confusing. There's very cliche here because there's a bad guy in the town. I say town, this looks like every single Minecraft village I think you've ever seen. If you've ever played Minecraft and stumbled across one of these villages, that is the setup for this. So minimalistic. But the bad guy of this town, they really drive up how bad he is. And how do they do that? Simply put, make him rapey. As soon as you make him slightly rapey, immediately he's a bad guy. Don't need to develop a character in any way, show any backstory, just one rapey-ish scene and done. That's all you need to know. He's a bad guy, up to bad things, don't need to develop it any further. But it did feel like a lot of the characters here where they didn't have much development to them or much character. It was, they weren't very deep characters. What is going to happen when you've got each of these movies has different characters in them, so they don't have a lot of time to be developed or really fleshed out, so they get the job done as quick as they can. And for this instance, it just felt very on the nose because it was the first time we've seen them. Don't get me wrong, some scenes in this first half of the movie were fantastic. There was the church scene, I won't say more than that. I thought they paced it really well and they built up the suspense really effectively. Where I didn't know what our characters were going to see when they went in, we found out at the same time they did, so we got to see some real-time reactions. So we find out the root and origins of Sarah Fryer here, and once that's been established with an interesting way in what develops, we get thrown straight back into 1994. What the setups that I thought of they were setting up in the first movie did have payoffs, some better than others, maybe did leave a few questions in here. Ultimately, they're finally ending the curse in 1994. So we've gathered all the information, and Dina, when she was Sarah Fryer, remembers all this when it comes back to modern day. So she's lived through Sarah Fryer and is now back. So when she comes back, she has all this knowledge. You know, no time's passed from 1994 for her, but she's lived days back then with a lot more information, a lot more knowledge, and she gets the history more. And with that newfound knowledge, takes that to her brother Josh, who is as terrific in this film as he was in the first one. And through both parts, I'll say this now, the film was paced very well. It was about an hour into the movie, was still 1666 until that changed. So it's long enough to tell us what we have to tell us without it being rushed, so it was paced well. But also, they didn't spend too long in this time, because I'll be honest, not a lot happened. When you think back, there's a few plot beats that take place in this time period, but ultimately not enough to have warranted its own movie. We're back in the mall for most of it. The good guys beat the big bad, everything's happy now, and time moves on. And we get a little kind of wrap up of where they all are at the end of the movie. So I'm going to move into spoilers now, because it is really difficult trying to avoid them here in this video. So if you don't want to see any spoilers, skip forward to this time I'm going to put down below. Okay, so you've seen the movie, good. Let's move on. Number one, the killers don't make a lot of sense to me. In the first movie, we're led to believe that they are hunting down Dina and Sam as part of the curse, okay? Which is fine for the first movie. But then what we realise in the third movie is they're getting too close to the truth, and that's why the killers are specifically hunting them down. So when you've changed the narrative, there also needs to be the steps needed to have kind of set that up subtly in the other movies, so that it's not obvious then, but with the new information and you look back, you can see this was always the plan. And it's quite clear this was always the plan. It's a trilogy of movies that released week on week. So they had them already, the full story made out. And it fell short for me, that, because with what we now realise, it doesn't make sense why Sam was being hunted so hard. She didn't know anything. She had no idea what was going on. She bled on the body of Sarah Fryer, but that was all she'd done. If I'm missing something, let me know. But that is the question I come away with, is why was she so heavily hunted? The biggest twist, the biggest spoiler, is that we find out this wasn't Sarah Fryer at all. It wasn't the witch. What it was actually the ancestor of the sheriff of the town back in 1666 made a deal with the devil for kind of power and what he wanted, but in exchange he would sacrifice up a name. That name would become a killer, and whoever they killed along with that named person would be kind of given back to the devil in return. Okay, that works. That's good. We've got a set up bad guy. Now, question one. Why is he only a sheriff if he made a deal with the fucking devil? That is as high as he could imagine his life being, was just a sheriff in a really small town. That doesn't add up. And then the big fight, so they come back to the mall. The guy that was in the police station in handcuffs that got let out by Josh, yes, he comes back. It's so shoehorned in. The plan is they're going to draw everybody, including the sheriff, to the shopping mall. They're going to get the killers to turn on the sheriff and kill him. And they need this guy because he works security, he helps them get in. So they show up to his house and just see if... Now, I know he's got run-ins with the police, but they outright just ask him as their opening gambit if he wants to kill the sheriff, and he just agrees and goes with it. And they make a bit of a joke out of it, but he's just agreed to kill a police officer or a sheriff. That's quite a big deal, and he's more than okay with it. Now, obviously the plan goes awry, and it's going to go wrong, but also this shopping mall was built over the original kind of epicenter of this, where the ancestor made his deal with the devil and made the cave system, and all this happened. Now, structurally, how did that take place? How was a mall built over these massive caves, not being filled in, not being dealt with in any way? They look like they did in the second movie, before the mall was built, back when it was the camp. They've built a mall without any foundation work. I'm so aware that that question does not matter in the bigger story, but I cannot help but ask that. It was cool that they went to it, but that doesn't make sense. Another thing is when they kill the sheriff, why not just shoot him? They have a gun. Gillian Jacobs' character conveniently has a gun, but when the sheriff is no longer there. So where did she get the gun from, and why couldn't she have just used that gun on him? One of the police come in because they've stolen a police car. One of the police officers arrives on the scene, kind of finds the kids waiting on the sheriff coming. That's fine. However, he gets fucking Jack Bakered. And if you've played Resident Evil 7, you know exactly what I mean when I say that, when you consider the garage fight setup. You're watching the police officer, and there's no way someone could have approached without knowing it. He just fucking pops in, kills him. And his brother. So his brother claimed that he didn't know about his family's roots and that they had to deal with the devil, because this has been passed down for 300 years now. But his brother's a mayor because of it. To show you this at the same time that it discovers that Nick is a sheriff of the town because he has had deals with the devil, got power, got what he wanted. And his brother is also a mayor. So clearly these two guys are in a position of power. His brother must know about this. It's been passed down for years. Nick's biggest goal and biggest drive is to not let this die out, not let his secret die out, and keep the curse going. His brother must know about it. Yet when they kill Nick, that's the curse over. The curse is lifted. But his brother's still out there who is aware of this. That doesn't add up. His brother should also have to die. They should have killed the good line for the curse to be broken. So the ending is good. It gives us a bit of a post-credit scene, which can set up a fourth movie potentially, which please don't do that. Also, the person that Josh has been messaging appears. Now he's had his arm broken, so he's got a big cast, offers to sign his cast, and then writes @ with her username on it, and he clicks that that's her. They've never spoken before. They don't really interact in that scene, and nobody has signed his cast except from Martin, yet she jumps straight on it just to give us that reveal. That was so shoehorned in. A lot of the things throughout these movies felt quite shoehorned in. Another question is, why did the sheriff leave a note for Ziggy saying it's happening again when he's in control? She's escaped it, clearly, this curse. She's escaped it because she didn't know enough, is what I'm taking from the movie now. Because at first I was wondering how she escaped being hunted down. Turns out she didn't know enough, she wasn't close to the truth, and so she didn't have to die. So why he left a note saying it's happening again when he didn't necessarily know that the kids had reached out to her? Ziggy, as an adult, was not in danger. Okay, so that's the main spoilers and really annoying questions that I was left with in this movie. But where do I stand on it? This was like a mini-series. They end with a next on moment. Sequels will start with a previously on to keep you kind of in the know of what's happening, just like a TV show does. These films do not stand on their own individually. The second one does, only during the camp scene. Doesn't have a full and kind of signed off ending to it. There's still a few questions if you're watching that area, but at least it has an arc, it has a plot that runs through the campsite. But the first one is all set up, does not stand on its own, and the third one certainly doesn't, because the first hour is 1666 and then the last hour of it, or thereabouts, is 1994 again. So the last part of the third one is like a sequel to the end of the first movie. I thought this movie wrapped everything up as its merits as its own movie. It was good, it paced well as, you know, a finale to a trilogy, but as its own movie. You couldn't just go ahead and watch this when you felt like maybe watching a horror movie. And I can't get myself away from that mentality, unfortunately, because there was some really good stuff in here. I'm going to say, for this movie and where I would rank it, I can't give it its own rating ultimately, because I would be wanting to say, if you have time, watch the movie, but you have to also have time for the first two in the series. So if you have 4.5 hours, 5 hours spare, sure, watch the trilogy. You might have a good time with it. So that's some of my thoughts on the movie. Critiques, some of the questions that were left unanswered. If there's any movies that you think I should be watching, maybe that I would enjoy, or that you'd like to see me react to, let me know down below. When you're down there, kick the fuck out that like button for me, that'd be fantastic. But that's my thoughts, and thanks for watching.